Hey, my name is George Riley, and I used to be a huge Todd Rogers fan back in the day, and I also broke one of Todd Rogers' video game records, and that was Galaxian for the Atari 2600. So I like to just give you my history of me being a fan of Todd Rogers, and then eventually coming to the conclusion that Todd Rogers basically had a lot of bogus scores in the database. 2002, I first heard of, or 2001 maybe, I heard about Todd Rogers. And I knew that he was a really good gamer. I would see the scores that he had, and they were freaking way out there. He had multiple 60-hour runs for the Atari 2600. One run, Journey Escape, was 85 and a half hours, he claimed. And so I was like, man, this guy is amazing. He's an amazing gamer. I'm just like an average gamer. And they had this thing called Atari Age, which I was an Atari 2600 collector at the time, so I went to that site. They had a contest, a weekly contest where they would have a game of the week and see who would get the highest score every week. Well, Todd Rogers started submitting right away the first 3 or 4 weeks, and he was getting first place scores. And at the time, the people at Atari Age were like, hey, what the freak, you've got Twin Galaxies here. You're like this really good gamer. You should really go to Twin Galaxies if you're going to submit these scores. This is a casual thing. We don't really want someone like you, Todd. And I was like, wait a minute. It doesn't matter. Anyone who wants to compete should be allowed to compete, even if they're really good. And so I actually defended Todd Rogers there. I was like, we should be honored to have Todd Rogers as a gamer. Mind you, at this time, I didn't realize that Todd Rogers was a fake at any way, shape, or form. Okay, 2005. I meet Todd Rogers for the first time. It's in Vegas. It's the classic, or it's the CG, I forgot what it was called. Anyway, Classic Gaming Expo. And he's there. He's basically a referee for Twin Galaxies at the time. So he's wearing this referee shirt with the black and white stripes. Basically, Walter Day wasn't the only one that wore the referee shirt. Basically, any referee at one time was wearing this referee shirt. And he was over there by the decathlon, this Atari 2600 with the decathlon cartridge put in. And they had this one game, I forgot what, I think maybe the javelin throw, if maybe something else. But anyway, it was this one game, and it was a contest to see who could get the highest score in this one game. And he was like, well, go play the game and then write your score down, right? And I think at the time, I don't even think he was around. He would like wander off, and he was like, well, and I think he wandered off while I was playing, and he was gone. I was like, okay, whatever. I wrote my score down. It wasn't the first place score. It was like 4th or 5th or whatever. And then I got to talking to him. It's like, wow, how the freak do you get those scores? Because he was great at decathlon. He had like first place scores in all the decathlon games. And he was like, here's a method. Put the joystick between your second and third finger and go. And so I tried the thing. I was like, no, Todd, this technique's not really working so well for me. So that might work for you, but for me, no, it's not working. So I basically, I gave up on that technique. I never was that good at decathlon, which was like a speed game as far as how fast you could go. Anyway, flash forward 4 years, I become really good at this one Atari 2600 game called Galaxian. It was a port of the arcade game Galaxian, obviously. Anyway, I basically decided, I was a substitute teacher at the time, and I was going to take 2 months to go after one of Todd Rogers' records. I didn't know if I was going to break it or not. I just felt, you know what, I'm going to give myself 2 months. And so I did it. I spent every day playing the game 3 times a day because I didn't want to get completely burnt out playing the game. Played it 3 times a day, game day in, day out, day in, day out. And I started getting better and better. Oh, by the way, the second place score was 250,000. Todd Rogers had a 1.34 million score, so his score was like 6 times higher than the second place score. My score was 220K at the time. So I start playing, and I get better and better. I beat the 250K score, and then I start getting better and better. I get to the point where I get 600K, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to submit this tape to Todd Rogers. And I wrote a big old letter, blah, 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 you're great, blah. You know, I consider you the greatest console gamer of all time. I see your scores up there. They're amazing. Turns out he never verified the score. He never, to this day, ever said, hey, yeah, I got that. You know, that was a cool submission you had, and I really appreciate that letter. He never mentioned it. Never, you know, like, okay, whatever. Maybe it got lost in the mail. Anyway, I decided after that, during the 2-month time period, to mail it off to someone else that might actually verify it quicker. So I get better and better and better, and to the point, there's 2 days before my time, I said July 31st would be my final day that I would play this. On July 30th, I broke the record and got 1.6 million, and this was like freaking a huge high for me. It was like I beat the freaking legend Todd Rogers. And at the time, I was like, yeah, I had no questions of the score. And so, a few months later, off and on, I would play the game again, and I got better and better and better. And I took it to 2.69 million, and I doubled his score. Anyway, now we flash forward to 2016, and this is when everything hits the fan, and it was bad. Then I start hearing about OmniGamer and how the 5.51 score is impossible, and that there's no way you can get that on Dragster. And so I was like, you know what? It's just one person's analysis. You know, he could be wrong. And so I actually posted on Atari Age, which I hadn't been to Atari Age in forever, and I said, help. This guy's saying that this is a bogus score. I don't know. Maybe it is. And then another programmer said no, who actually was like in Todd Rogers' camp, and said, I believe in Todd Rogers. I'm going to analyze the code and see if this is true. He came to the same conclusion, that 5.51 was impossible. Then later on, a couple days later, another programmer comes out and says, I've also analyzed the code. 5.51 is impossible. Then TG had this dispute system that they started. And then there were other disputes. One with Wabbit, where he had a 1,398 score, but it was found out that the highest you could get was 1,300 no matter what you do. That was the highest, and somehow he's got a score that's higher than the Wabbit score. Then there were other ones. Then there was the Taz game, which, based on the scoring interval, was impossible for him to have a score. Then there were other claims that came out that he got like 99 million on Splatterhouse, which would be like a 120-hour game. And it just started rolling and rolling and rolling about all this. It's soon enough, there were like 9 or 10 games where it was proven that it's impossible to get the score. It wasn't just Dragster. It was these other games. And so it got to the point where I'm like, you know, I'm a fan of Todd Rogers. But at some point, you have to go, if you actually study everything out, and say, the evidence says otherwise. The evidence says this guy faked these scores, at least the ones that were in dispute. And I was like, if he's faking 9 or 10 scores, maybe he's faking other ones that are not provable to be fake. You know, so I came to the realization that Todd Rogers is a cheat. It was a hard thing to come with, because I even got his freaking autograph. Like, freaking, I have 5 Todd Rogers cards that are autographed. I mean, I'm a freaking huge Todd Rogers fan, but not anymore. After this, it's like the evidence points otherwise. There's so much evidence that says no. And no matter how much of a fan I am of Todd Rogers, I have to realize the evidence points to him being a cheat. And so I realized the guy I idolized, who I thought was an amazing gamer, who I thought was, boom, up there on the Mount Rushmore of gamers. I would have put Todd Rogers on the Mount Rushmore of gamers. And I found out, looks like a lot of his scores were fake. In fact, who knows, maybe the Galaxian score I beat, the one I spent freaking 2 months on, just to focus on that one score, was fake. So that's how I came to realize after why I beat Todd Rogers' score, because I thought he was a legend, and just having beating one of his scores would have meant the world to me. But then you find out, no, what you thought was true was a lie, and this whole world is not true. I wish the evidence would speak in his favor, but Todd Rogers also. YouTube's been around since 2006. You've been able to put videos on the internet for a while now. Todd Rogers has not put a video on the internet of his gameplay. The only gameplay video that you'll see of Todd Rogers is of him playing Dragster, and he gets like a 5.8 or 5.7 at best. After all that, and that's it. That's the only video. The one video that he has on the internet after all those years. You'd think someone that in 2002 who had submitted like hundreds of records, hundreds of scores to Twin Galaxies, that he would want one of his gameplays available on the internet to say, hey, this is me. If you're gonna brag about your freaking games and submit like hundreds of scores, you would think you would have submitted one score, but he didn't. And so that's when I came to the sad realization, after everything, it's like, no. It all points to him being a fraud. And I would love it. I would love it if Todd Rogers came out and said, look, screw you guys. I've got videotapes. I've got a videotape of me doing 551 on Dragster. I've got videotapes of me getting 1,500 for Wabbit. I would love that. But I know that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen because that's not possible. And again, I would love Todd Rogers to prove me wrong. Oh, I would love him to prove me wrong. I would love him to prove me wrong and say, oh, George, I am this great gamer. I am, and I'll show you, and I'll put these great video game videos on the internet, and I'll prove to you how good I am because I still have the skills, and I'll freaking do that. At least he hasn't. He hasn't done anything. His defense is, Activision said I did it 30 years ago. I'm like, yeah, okay. But they also said 2 other people got 5.51 too, Todd. And they verified your score because your technique was a little bit different than theirs. That's the only difference. Anyway, there you go. That's the whole thing. That's how I came to the conclusion. He's a fraud. And I'd be welcome to be proven wrong. I don't want to think of him as a fake, but I have to. All right. I'm signing off. Bye.